In March 2025, the United States Navy pointed the bow of some of its behemoth warships, including the USS Iwo Jim assault ship, which also functions as an aircraft carrier, towards the Venezuelan water space with its intentions still unknown to the public. How will Venezuela react to the appearance of this Titan? Could there be a possible war on the horizon? Join us as we discuss the sudden appearance of America's $13.2 billion aircraft carrier in Venezuelan waters. The United States has been at the pinnacle of military technology since time immemorial, with the continuous attribution of some of the greatest inventions to it. While they have shown inventiveness and guile, they have also reflected their ability to go to war should the need arise. Although some countries have been compelled to form alliances with the United States due to its military prowess, others remain on opposite sides, continuing to disagree on political issues and transnational interests. The possibility of war remains on the horizon. As the international relations with some countries continue to be difficult, the United States has continued to shield and protect its territories by setting up some of the most highly guarded defenses of all time across the land, the seas, and the air, with inventions that strike fear right into the hearts of a neighboring nation harboring intentions of harm towards the United States. While these defensive measures have been labeled as effective, have they entirely put a stop to foreign threats? Although the United States intelligence has created a reputation that breathes a rethink into any opposing forces, there is a continuous effort from the cartels of several countries seeking ways into the United States to break through these defenses, but mostly by stealth rather than all-out war, which they are sure to lose. While the United States Army, the Drug Enforcement Agency, or DEA, and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, popularly called ICE, have been tasked by the United States to oversee the actions of these opposing forces on land and deal with the threats by whatever means necessary, the cartels have grown even smarter and better at their trade than in past decades. In recent times, the United States has gathered strong intelligence on cartels from South America, like the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the Knight Templar Cartel, and the Sinaloa Cartel, which trade in cocaine, methamphetamine, opioids, humans, and weapons trafficking. Owing to the strict restrictions that have been put in place on the United States-Mexico border, where most of the cartel members have been apprehended, they have resorted to using the open seas. While the rationale appears basic, it was somewhat understandable. Defending a large body of water where numerous ships travel is difficult for any nation's military intelligence, regardless of the size and the technology available to them. While there has been some recorded success from the government of the United States, where the Coast Guard has successfully apprehended vessels carrying precursors for creating some of the most radical drugs in the narcotics pipeline, especially for the Sinaloa cartel, there remains an apparent continuity in production, meaning that they might have cut off a vast supply. Still, a considerable sum has also slipped past them at sea. But what solutions could be more effective to capture a bigger part of these maritime missions? The United States developed sea behemoths, titans that look like floating cities, bossing the ocean from coast to coast. For some context, the United States commissioned the USS Iwo Jim into the United States Navy in 2001 and sent it out on the Atlantic Ocean as a representative of the naval strength of the United States. Although the USS Iwo Jim was designed as a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship of the United States Navy, the consistent chase of narco vessels, including submarines and go-fast boats, created the need for a faster vessel that could take on these boats and also deploy airstrikes when needed. While the United States Maritime Forces, including the Coast Guard, the Customs and Border Patrol, and ultimately the United States Navy, have been hot on the trail of opposing maritime forces and subduing them using whatever means necessary, they have the support of other countries like the United Kingdom, Russia, and sometimes Mexico, providing intelligence on how and when to strike the drug vessels that come from different countries once they detect their vessels on their radar. However, Mexico's support has been inconsistent over the years, with changes in government leading to changes in its approach to international relations. For some context, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, popularly called AMLO, voiced his complaint about the United States, accusing it of overreaching and defying the sovereignty of Mexico, using the Merida Initiative as an excuse to take Mexican lives instead of re-educating them and rooting out the real cause of the drug trade, particularly poverty. In return, the United States government accused the Mexican government of not doing enough. Washington believed that the Mexican government chose to hide intelligence about specific locations and the workflow of the cartels existing within their country in a bid to protect its sovereignty and stop the United States from using the Merida Initiative as a trigger to bypass sovereign laws and fracture their international relationship in the process. Following the change in government in both countries, with Donald Trump as President of the United States and Claudia Sheinbaum as President of Mexico, both countries are once again back on track. Although the Merida Initiative has been largely abandoned, the Mexican government has agreed to continue sharing intelligence with the United States, provided that it is kept informed about how the operation is conducted. In September 2025, the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, met with the representatives of Mexico in a meeting where they discussed the reciprocity of cooperation in matters of security, which will be based on respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, reaffirming there. Both governments have created a high-level implementation group that will meet regularly to follow up on joint commitments and actions undertaken within their own countries, including measures to combat cartels, strengthen security at the border, eliminate clandestine trans-border tunnels, address the issue of illicit financial flows, improve collaboration to prevent fuel theft, and increase inspections, investigations, and legal processes to stop the flow of arms and drug trafficking. With the Mexican government's recognition of its status as a narco-state, reaching an agreement and cooperating with the United States required some compromise on some of its tightest laws, which was not too difficult. While the Mexican government continues to provide support for the United States, Colombia, popular for its cocaine and weapons trafficking, which is often ferried through the Mexican cartels, who then send their carriers into the United States, has decided to join forces with the United States. Although Colombia's support seems at its strongest in recent years, it started a long time ago, particularly in the 90s. The United States had created an initiative called Plan Colombia, which oversaw the consistent billions of dollars being sent to Colombia to help fight against the continuous rise in cocaine trafficking. The official objective was to end the Colombian armed conflict by increasing funding and training of Colombian military and paramilitary forces and creating an anti-cocaine strategy to eradicate coca cultivation. The plan was solid and it provided serious results, as the cocaine production in Colombia dropped well over 70% between 2001 and 2012. While the plan worked until 2016, when both nations came to an agreement of not needing it anymore, Colombia, with the help of the United States, held a peace agreement referendum, which terminated the conflict with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, a Marxist-Leninist group that wanted full control of Colombia and its resources, especially coca, the plant used to create cocaine. Supporters of the plan in the United States Congress asserted that over 1,300 square kilometers of mature coca were sprayed and eradicated in Colombia in 2003, which would have prevented the production of over 500 metric tons of cocaine. This plan eliminated over $100 million of the illegal income that supports drug dealers and different illegal organizations in the United States, who are funded by that cash flow. While Plan Colombia was functioning, Colombia became the United States' greatest ally in South America, with extradition going up 1,000-fold, and the left-wing insurgents were finally dealt with. However, it wasn't long after the end of the Plan Colombia initiative before the guerrillas took control of the coca plantations and operated in the jungle, protected by armed men while they cultivated coca. The United States described the Colombian government as not doing enough to curb the sudden surge of coca cultivation, which has increased the percentage of cocaine being moved inside the United States, increasing the odds of addiction to the narcotic substance in the United States. While the tension between the two countries rose to a fever pitch, it wasn't long before they found a compromise, and yet again, they returned to collaborating and exchanging intelligence about the cartels. However, as much as Bogotá and the Mexican governments worked to reduce the flow of drug trafficking, human trafficking, and weapons trafficking in South America, there is one country in South America that provides no support or displays any sort of interest in the United States' desperate attempts to stop the flow of drugs and weapons into the country. and that country is Venezuela. Over the years, Caracas and Washington have been at odds over the possibility of cooperation between the two countries. The sovereign state of Venezuela has always considered the United States as imperialists, who are only capable of colonization and taking what they want by force. However, it all dates back to Hugo Chavez, who rose to power in the late 1990s and built a revolution so powerful that even the United States government could not control it. He built the popular Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela on a mandate that declared the United States an enemy of the state, which only wants control of Venezuelan oil. He was quick to reel the world in, letting them know that he had taken a stance in Latin America against the United States, a far cry from the cooperative Colombia and Mexico, which share valuable intelligence with the United States about the presence of the cartels in their respective countries. As expected, he had the backing of Russia, China, and Cuba, three sovereign states that had been in natural opposition to the United States since time immemorial. When Hugo Chavez died in 2013, the United States tried another attempt at getting Venezuela to enter into an agreement quite similar to that of Colombia and Mexico, where they have a joint task force and shared intelligence on the cartels while strategizing a takedown. However, Nicolas Maduro, who took over Chavez's regime, kicked against the idea. Hence, the United States imposed sanctions on Venezuela's oil assets and imposed restrictions on their banking systems, pushing the country further into creating more diplomatic ties with foreign countries, especially Russia, on whom they depended for weapons, China, on whom the Venezuelan government relied for loans, and Iraq, on whom they depended for weapons. These continuous restrictions on Venezuela created a seemingly permanent torn rift between them and the United States. By mid-2010s, the United States government had deemed Venezuela a narco-state, especially because of a perceived indulgence of a notorious drug cartel called the Cartel of the Sun. The cartel became dangerously described as the most volatile and strategic in South America, especially because the Venezuelan borders were so easily bypassed. The rationale behind the United States government's decision on Venezuela comes from the country's position in the Caribbean and how lax its security measures are. For some context, Venezuela sits just east of Colombia, the country that mass produces the highest amount of cocaine in the world. Hence, with relaxed security of its borders, the cartels could simply ferry their narcotics to the Dominican Republic, Africa, Europe, and all over the world, almost without any consequences. While the United States has tried to fix the relationship between the two countries, the Venezuelan government only sees the United States as colonialists who are trying to get all of Latin America under their control. Hence, the United States chose to strike again in March 2020, accusing Nicolas Maduro Moros and 14 other leaders of Venezuela of narco-terrorism, corruption, drug trafficking, and other criminal charges. The United States alleged that the Venezuelan government officials partnered with the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, or FARC, to use cocaine as a weapon to flood the United States. According to United States Attorney General Barr, for more than 20 years, Maduro and several high-ranking colleagues allegedly conspired with the Colombian leftists, causing tons of cocaine to enter and devastate American communities. Hence, the allegation is focused on rooting out the extensive corruption within the Venezuelan government, which he described as a system constructed and controlled to enrich those at the highest levels of the government. The United States will not allow these corrupt Venezuelan officials to use the United States banking system to move their illicit proceeds from South America, nor further their criminal schemes, Barr declared. Although there is no obvious evidence that points to Nicolas Maduro as being culpable for the allegations levied against him, the United States government continued to try to make the allegations stick and possibly go to trial. However, they found nothing to make it stick. Following the allegations, the relationship got even worse between both nations, with Venezuela being the only narco state whose government is not in alliance with the United States and is also unwilling to give up valuable intelligence about their sea routes or whatever vessel that comes up on their radar. Owing to the restrictions placed on the country by the United States, Venezuela has become a narco state. Furthermore, they use the Cartel of the Suns to help prop up the Maduro government and the Venezuelan economy. Within this system, the regime rewards loyalty through assignment to regions known to offer a wealth of opportunities for enrichment through drug trafficking and other criminal opportunities that can be achieved through smuggling or trafficking. Furthermore, they use their military to participate in drug trafficking in 4 key ways. The most common way is simply to take payoffs to turn a blind eye to or guarantee impunity for trafficking operations, or through military cells creating free movement corridors for traffickers, which can be aerial, for example, by turning off radars to allow drug flights to pass, or providing special codes for the flight to be registered as legal. Terrestrial, for example, by facilitating passage through networks of checkpoints. Or maritime, which could be handled by halting patrols at certain times to allow drug boats to pass without any form of hindrance. However, the United States has finally had enough. Hence, they decided to unleash their naval and air superiority worth over $13 billion on the shores of Venezuela. The day was September 3, 2025, when the Trump administration decided to dispatch warships, including assets like the USS San Antonio, USS Iwo Jim, USS Fort Lauderdale, and reportedly the USS Lake Erie, USS Gravely, and USS Jason Dunham. It was no longer a litigious battle. The time for discussion was over. The United States had now decided to act on the intelligence that was gathered by the Drug Enforcement Agency and other bodies involved in the war on drugs. The warships were dispatched to counter threats posed by the criminal organizations operating in the region. For some context, the United States never used military forces against drug cartels, as they were not considered foreign terrorist organizations. However, since the start of the Donald Trump administration in 2025, the United States in January of the same year finally decided on designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, meaning that the United States had the license to unleash the full power of its military. In addition to the warships, one of which included the USS Iwo Jim, a warship capable of carrying a mix of aircraft like helicopters and fighter jets like the F-35 Lightning II, Pentagon also gave the green light to dispatch 1 nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine with more than 4,500 sailors and Marines on board the vessels, with only one goal: taking down a representative of the drug economy of Venezuela. President Donald Trump released a video showing that the vessel was smuggling drugs out of Venezuela for the Tren de Aragua gang. According to the Chief of Armed Forces' social media post, the missile, which is suspected to be an AGM-114 Hellfire missile, took out 11 people who were on the vessel. The vessel, which appears to be a go-fast boat, was a familiar play from the Mexican cartel playbooks. Hence, the United States had enough intelligence on it. After the strike, the United States president posted a very strong message online to the Venezuelan cartels and others around the world. No U.S. forces were harmed in this strike. Please let this serve as notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America. Beware, the president said. As expected, the news had reached the Venezuelan president, Maduro, who has now criticized the United States' use of military forces in their waters, despite the restriction that comes with such actions, without consulting the affected country beforehand. He claims that the United States is on the cusp of setting a precedent for war, and he will be prepared to retaliate in kind if the United States continues to bombard their shores. He further claims that the United States is trying to topple his government, forcing a regime change through military interference. Venezuela is confronting the biggest threat that has been seen on our continent in the last 100 years. If Venezuela were attacked, we would immediately move to armed struggle in defense of our territory, he said, pledging to declare a republic in arms. With the fires of war stoked between the two sovereign states, it remains to be seen if it ends in an all-out war or peace talks. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.